So, you're thinking about playing Pathfinder 2e for the first time and you've come across your very first roadblock, character creation. There are a lot of choices. Far gone are the days of like 8 or less base classes in TTRPG systems. Pathfinder 2e has, I think, 24. Now, that may sound like an insane amount of classes, but remember that's over the course of the last 5 years, usually releasing 2 classes a year. I believe the base game launched with 12 base classes, with more coming with every single major expansion book. So when you sit down to look at Pathfinder, don't see, oh, 24 different classes to pick from, that's too many. If you feel overwhelmed, just stick to Player Core 1, and if you want a few more options, Player Core 2. Those are your main classes that were designed really for the base of the system. Everything beyond those 2 books is icing on the cake. Now, when I sat down to make this video, I really thought about making this structured, like, informational guide of here's what every class does, here's their main class features, and I said, wow, that's really boring. Instead, I'm just going to tell you about every single class. This video has no script. I did not prepare for this. All I did was write down all of the classes in the game and put them into one of 3 categories: martials, magic, or monkeys. Like a skill monkey. So if you've been struggling to pick a class, sit back, relax, get an iced coffee or something. I don't know, treat yourself. You deserve it, boo. I'm just gonna be rambling about every single class for about a minute or so each, just giving you the basic idea. Some will be longer, some will be shorter. I don't even know what I'm gonna say. Like I said, I'm just sort of winging it off the top of my head. And speaking of off the top of my head and segues that don't make sense, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more Pathfinder 2e content, and potentially more important these days, leave a like on the video, because the algorithm sees that and says, oh, like, show more. Hate you, YouTube. Let's get started with the fighter. The fighter fights stuff. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. When you play a fighter in Pathfinder 2e, you are the best at hitting stuff. You don't necessarily hit it the hardest, you don't necessarily inflict the most bonus conditions or anything when you hit them, but by God do you hit them more often than anybody else in the game, because the fighter actually starts at a higher proficiency level than any other class. Nobody else in the game, except for one other class we'll get to later, starts at expert proficiency with weapons, which is just a flat +2 over anybody else who would be trained. As such, especially early on, fighters can dominate the battlefield, and this holds all the way through the game. In every single campaign I've ever played, the fighter has always been reliable. They never have dead levels or points of weakness or strength compared to other portions of the campaign. The fighter is just always good. And that's not to say the fighter is boring either. They're one of the few classes in Pathfinder that doesn't have a subclass. You do not pick a single subclass, rather your subclass, quote unquote, is based on the feats you pick. If you want to go hard, you know, go with sudden charge to get in and start dealing damage. Do you want to inflict some conditions? Maybe take snagging strike or knockdown. There's a bunch of different ways to build the fighter with a variety of different weapon types, and that's where your customization is going to come in. No 2 fighters are going to play the exact same, even though they're all going to be incredibly accurate. The Barbarian, while on paper might seem similar to the fighter, is incredibly different in Pathfinder 2e thanks to their instinct. Every single Barbarian, when they are raging, goes into a very specific rage based on your subclass that you've picked. Draconic, Spirit, Superstition, Giant, another one. All of these grant you bonus damage while raging, but they'll often be different damage types. Like if you're Draconic, your damage type is going to be the same type as your dragon that you are raging, inspired by, you know, cold or acid or fire or whatnot. Tons of unique feats for each subclass, as well as just cool feats in the Barbarian's kit themselves. So many amazing features, a lot of them interacting with the athletics skill if you want to be more of a grappler or what have you. The Barbarian is, as they should be, a lot more brutal than the fighter. They don't have the accuracy of the fighter, but their damage is going to be so much higher. Almost nobody in the game can match the damage output of a Great Axe Giant Instinct Barbarian. They're not going to hit or crit quite as often as a fighter, but when they do, oh my gods. I'm just saying, at level 1, a Giant Instinct Barbarian with a Great Axe can critically hit for 2d12 plus 12 plus 8. Barbarians are cool. Just a big number, cool number, various damage types. Love it. I forgot about Animal Instinct Barbarian. How did I forget? That's like my favorite. This is what ADHD does to you kids. The Ranger is like a bit more specialized fighter. Again, not quite as accurate, however, most of their attacks based on one of their subclasses have additional effects. If you choose Precision, you just deal a flat 1d8 bonus damage on your first hit per turn. If you're Flurry, the multiple attack penalty, which is what reduces your accuracy every time you attack on the same turn, is lower than any other class. Normally, a character will be attacking at -5 for their second attack or -10 for their third attack on the same turn. If you're a Flurry Ranger with agile weapons, you're only attacking at -3 and then -6, meaning it is not beyond the realm of possibility to attack 3 times at level 1 and hit all 3 attacks. You won't be critting as often as the fighter, you won't be hitting as hard as the Barbarian, but boy can Ranger just do some cool stuff within the confines of the game's rules. Alongside this, all of their subclass benefits, known as their Hunter's Edge, also apply to their animal companion should they choose to take one. If you take the Outwit Ranger Hunter's Edge, then not only do you get +1 to armor class against your hunted prey, but so does your animal companion. There's so many cool ways to build this class with an animal companion. Without one, magical ranger spells, purely martial ranger with no magic whatsoever, melee, ranged, knowledge-based. Yes, there's an entire build in this game that you can make centered around a ranger who just identifies enemies and points out the weaknesses to the rest of their team. I love Pathfinder. The Ranger's super cool. Highly recommend playing one if you've never given them a shot. The Champion. This is your Paladin from 5e, the Holy Warrior, the Bulwark of Faith, who is just there to take hits, deal out some damage in return, and just be the wall that keeps the enemies off of your squishier backline. What's there to say about the Champion? They get some basic magical abilities, they are a massive tank with the highest armor proficiency in the entire game, I believe reaching Legendary with heavy armor proficiency. Champion is one of the 2 classes in this game that can reach the highest possible armor class at max level. If you want to be a wall that cannot be moved, you want to play a Champion. They feel great. They're all built around their Champion's reaction, which is based on one of your, I think, 10 subclass options now or something like that. Maybe it's like 7 or 8. It's a lot. There's a lot of subclass options for Champion, and they all get a different reaction. And the nice thing that doesn't overwhelm you is most of the reactions work the same way. They are going to either reduce the damage that your allies take from an attack near you, or reduce the damage you take from an attack against you. They're very simple. They all do that, plus a bonus effect based on your subclass. Super cool. They got some really amazing changes in the remaster that make them a lot more palatable as a class, in my opinion. They were already good, but now they are phenomenal. And they're a great option if you just want a martial character with a splash of magic, because they have some feats that can give them special spells based on their deity. Just keep in mind that unlike a D&D paladin, champions are not inherently spellcasters. They will not get spell slots or any spells from the divine spell list. The monk is the king of action economy in Pathfinder 2e, known for their flurry of blows, a single action to attack twice at level 1 for no resource. You can just do this once per turn is actually crazy, and especially as they go up in level and get more speed and get access to various stances or key spells or various different monk abilities, their ability to manipulate and use the action economy to their own advantage is unparalleled. A decently leveled monk, I'm not even talking about feat choices, just by leveling up as a monk, you will be able to move like 80 feet and attack twice in a single round. It's incredible, and that's with no feat options, that's with no buffs, that's just standard. Now, this does lend itself to some beginner issues, which is too much action economy. Believe it or not, there is such a thing as having too many actions. At level 1, especially if you're already in melee, you're not fighting any fancy enemies with any like puzzle mechanics or anything super engaging. Maybe your GM is new too and they're just having you fight, I don't know, like a wolf, and you have no reason to move on the battlefield. It can feel pretty bad to flurry of blows, that's 2 attacks, and you attack 2 more times at -8 or -10 based on your character. So in a way, the monk is more useful based off of how much more intricate the encounter is. The more actions are needed, the better the monk gets. They will not hit as accurately as a fighter. They will not hit as hard as a barbarian, but if you just need to move or interact with things or just do stuff, monks are fantastic. They're also dripping with so much flavor. They're not just an Eastern meditative monk. They're not just a Buddhist monk. There are so many different ways to build your monk in Pathfinder, from a drunken brawler to an elementalist to other things that I didn't script into this video because writing's for nerds and I'd rather improv things. But seriously, just look at the level 1 monk feats and all the different stances you can pick from. It's amazing how diverse monks can be right at level 1. The Gunslinger is the other class I mentioned back at the fighter that does start at expert proficiency with weapons. However, Gunslingers are specifically just with firearms and crossbows. They are a ranged class, usually, because they have a bunch of different subclasses, some of which actually lend themselves to playing like a melee duelist who alternates between one-handed melee weapons and firing point blank with a one-handed firearm. The Gunslinger is fantastic. If you want to use firearms, it's hard to recommend any other class over the Gunslinger. They're just cracked with them, which is important, and this is sort of what makes the Gunslinger fun in my opinion. Unlike a fighter who in melee, if they have a long sword and they don't crit, 1d8 plus 4 damage, that's gonna be great. A Gunslinger, however, does not do nearly as much damage unless they crit. The Gunslinger is much more risk versus reward. On your turn, if you have a 1d8 arbalest, is that how arbalest? I hope that's the right word. I always get this confused with something else. But if you have a 1d8 firearm and you just normal hit, you're only dealing 1d8. You don't add dex or any modifier like that. It is just a flat number. However, that weapon might have the fatal D12 trait, which means when you critically hit, you're suddenly dealing 3d12 instead of 1d8. Firearms almost all have the fatal trait, unless they all do, and I'm misremembering. I think they might all have that trait because they are all built around critical hits. Normal hits, very unimpressive damage. Critical hits, you are exploding their brains in Minecraft. And then, of course, they've got tons of feats to alter how they use their weapons. Reloading better, moving and reloading, tons of different things to give them better action economy, because that's another place the Gunslinger struggles. Talk about struggling. I couldn't even say the word. Needing to shoot and then reload between shots, the Gunslinger can feel a lot slower, usually only getting 1 good shot off per round compared to a melee character who might get 2 or even 3. It's all your eggs in one basket. If you crit, phenomenal. You're going to probably one-shot that enemy. If you normal hit, it's going to be a little bit unimpressive, but are you willing to take that risk? That's what the Gunslinger is all about. The Exemplar, this one's going to be hard because I've done very, very little research on it. I know nothing about its feats. It only just came out recently while I was in the middle of my subathon, I think. And so I haven't had time to sit down and read through it, but I do know the basics. It is a rare class, which means you need explicit GM permission to play this class. But if you do, it's really damn cool because you actually have a spark of divinity, a piece of godly power inside of your body. And you have 3 different icons. I believe these icons are weapon, worn, and body, and you can move that spark of imminence, I believe it's called, into one of your icons. As long as it is in that icon, let's say your weapon, then whenever you land a hit with that weapon, you can say inflict 1 persistent spirit damage. Not bad, just a little bit of like pinging damage over time. But then you can activate that imminence to get an even bigger effect, but once you do, you shift that imminence to a different icon, either your body or your worn icon. So it's all about having special bonuses that are cycling. Do you keep the passive bonus you currently have because it fits the situation, or do you activate it to get the big bonus immediately and then have to pick a different passive to activate in that moment going forward? It's really cool. It's sort of like juggling your own abilities, but you can only have 1 ability active at a time. If that sounds appealing to you, consider checking out the Exemplar, though a fair warning to GMs out there, it's not the most balanced class. There's a lot of things that I think do go against Pathfinder 2E's game design. It's still built within the confines of the system's design, but it can trivialize things. For example, there is a single icon that can just be activated to heal for like 2d6, and there's no cooldown. So they can activate it, heal, shift out, shift back in, heal, 2d6, shift out, shift back in. I have an Exemplar in my game, and I say you can only activate icons in combat because infinite healing outside of combat like that for no time or resource is just kind of boring. So I do really recommend the Exemplar. It's really cool flavor, and it really explores Pathfinder in its game design at a core. But you might have to just make a few GM decisions. It's rare for a reason, and I don't agree with Paizo putting the rare tag on it and making it stronger in some ways. I think that is a misuse of the rare tag, and the tag should be used for actual universe rarity, which it is, because most people do not have a spark of godlyhood in them, but I feel like they pushed it and said, yeah, but it's a little bit stronger than other classes because of that, and that's not okay. Still a great class, though. And the final martial class I'm talking about is the Thaumaturge, one of the most unique classes in all of Pathfinder 2e, my personal favorite martial class, because they are specifically a one-handed weapon using martial. They do bonus damage with one-handed weapons, specifically because they're designed to have an implement in their offhand, like a bell or a mirror, and effectively they're supposed to be fighting with their weapon while utilizing this magical implement to augment their abilities, thus empowering the strikes of their single-handed weapon. The reason I love the Thaumaturge so much is because it has weaponized the recall knowledge action. Pathfinder 2e is actually really well built around using recall knowledge, not only to get ideas of information and where to go in regards to the story, but in combat. You can use recall knowledge to learn stronger saving throws, weaknesses, resistances, immunities, and in the case of the Thaumaturge, they have a special ability that lets them roll recall knowledge to inflict a weakness or make it so their attacks count as the weakness of their target. If you're fighting a troll as a Thaumaturge and you know they're weak to acid, well, guess what? You have a handy bag of random garbage called esoterica, and maybe you have some weird acidic oil that, just flavor-wise, when you roll recall knowledge, you realize, okay, you're weak to acid, and you coat your sword in just the slightest bit of acidic oil so that when you attack this troll, they take their weakness damage. It's all a knowledge-based class, so they are a martial, they are up in there, they are doing work, but it's all about information on your enemy, and even if the enemy has no weakness, you get to create one. It's so cool that half of this class's damage come from either taking advantage of weaknesses or inventing new ones for the target, and that's just so neat. It helps with player storytelling. So there's your martial options. The magic options, I don't think I'm going to get into in as much detail because a lot of their power does come from their spell casting, so even if I talk about these classes less, that doesn't mean they are less special than the martials. It just means that they often get half as many unique features because they have full spellcasting capabilities. Starting with the Cleric, which is your classic divine caster, and if you just look at Cleric as a healer, you're doing yourself a disservice. Are they the best healer in the game? Absolutely, because clerics get a bonus number of spell slots per day devoted just to the heal spell. Unless they have a harmful deity, in which case they can just be an insane damage dealer with the harm spell, but the heal spell is insane. Right at level 1, they get 4 bonus spell slots that can only be used for heal or harm based on their deity. And for heal, for context, heal can restore 1d8 plus 8 hit points at 30-foot range, 2 actions. It's crazy. The heal spell in Pathfinder 2e is insane. Hit points are very valuable. Pathfinder 2e is very swingy, not in the same way as D&D though. I'm not going to go into detail here, but in Pathfinder 2e, going down and getting back up does have consequences in combat, so the Cleric being able to restore you almost to full with a single spell cast and having so many extra of those spells per day is great for keeping your party in the fight. But the Divine Spell list is far more than just healing. They've got a lot of cool options. They can pick from a few different subclasses called Doctrines. You can either be a Cleric of the Cloth as a cloistered cleric, or wear a little bit heavier armor with the War Priest. I have feelings on the War Priest, but people get mad when I make fun of it. The Sorcerer. This is your classic spontaneous spellcaster. If you don't want to prepare specific spells, you can play a Sorcerer. And the cool thing with Sorcerers is they can be any kind of spellcaster. What do I mean by that? Well, Pathfinder spell lists are not class specific. You don't have wizard spells, cleric spells, and druid spells. No, you have arcane spells, divine spells, primal spells, and occult spells. And the Sorcerer, based on your bloodline, can cast any 4 of those. Are you an Imperial Sorcerer? You cast arcane spells. Are you a Diabolic Bloodline Sorcerer? You cast divine spells. Are you a Fey Bloodline Sorcerer? You cast primal spells. It's so cool. They're completely different spell lists, so different sorcerers can be radically different characters on top of getting unique spells based on their chosen bloodline. It's rad. Their feats overall are interesting. Some of them do play into your bloodline, but a lot of them are basic magical spellcasting support. A lot of your character is going to come from your bloodline. And again, without needing to prepare spells, you can just cast anything you know. The trade-off is that you know a lot less spells than something like a wizard. The Bard is incredibly similar to the Sorcerer in a lot of ways, in that it is a spontaneous spellcaster, and it is only restricted to the occult spell list, but where the Bard stands out is in its composition spells and cantrips. This is wild. The Bard is easily the best support buff class in the entire game. Inspire Courage, or I believe it's called Courageous Anthem in the remaster, is immediately insane right at level 1. For the next turn, every ally within 60 feet gets +1 to attack rolls, +1 to damage, and +1 to saves against fear. That costs 1 action. You can do it every single turn. It's a cantrip. It's incredible. Add that on top of just being able to be a full spontaneous spellcaster. The occult spell list has some really good offensive spells, debuff spells, control spells. The bards are incredibly flexible characters. There's even a subclass that lets you go into melee a little bit. It's not great, but you can. Their subclasses are actually based on the muse that inspires you. Are you a polymath muse who's interested in everything? Are you an enigma muse bard who's interested in this one thing that they struggle to put into words and use their art to try to replicate? There's a lot of cool character concepts for bards. However, one thing to keep in mind, bards are not skill monkeys. They don't get anything akin to expertise in Pathfinder 2e. The closest thing you'll get is the polymath bard, which gets a specific lore skill they can use to recall knowledge about any subject. It's useful, but they don't get a whole ton of skill proficiencies compared to other classes in this game. The Druid is so hard to pin down. The Druid is one of the most flexible classes in the game. I know I called Bard flexible 30 seconds ago. Druids are the absolute cream of the crop flexibility. You can be a backline support caster, a backline offensive caster, a mid-range control caster, a frontline caster, a frontline melee combatant, a summoning character, a shape-shifting character. There is nothing the Druid cannot do. There's a bunch of different subclasses which all specialize into different things, but no matter what you pick, you're going to have full access to the entire primal spell list, which has some crazy powerful spells at its disposal, alongside some wonderfully flavorful and impactful feats. Druids have a lot of the most interesting feats out of all spellcasters in Pathfinder 2e. They can support specific builds, like adding new shape-shifting forms. They can augment your spells. There's too much to go into here. If you want 1,000 different options from a base character design perspective, pick a Druid. The best part, you can even mix and match them. They literally get a feat that lets you gain some of the benefits of a different subclass. So you could be an Order of the Animal Druid with an animal companion, and then also take the benefits of Order of the Wild so you can shapeshift to fight alongside your animal companion. Things like that make the Druid so diverse. There are 1,000+ ways to make a level 1 Druid, and I think that is rad. The Wizard. You're a wizard. I wish there was more I could say. It is cool. You still get a subclass based on the kind of wizarding college you went to, which is going to give you unique focus spells and give you specific spells you can cast that may not be available to other wizards. But overall, if you want to play a prepared spellcaster who learns spells, has more spells in their spellbook than something like a sorcerer, but has to prepare them specifically and gets magical feats that allow them to augment and expand and do cool things with their spells, it's the wizard. You know, it's a wizard. What I do like about wizards is they do get a special kind of extra subclass called their arcane thesis. This might give you a powerful familiar, or it might allow you to replace spells in the middle of the day. They're cool. They add a little bit of flavor to make one wizard different from another, so that you're not just both playing a guy who casts spells, but at the end of the day, the wizard is a guy who casts spells. But thankfully, because Pathfinder has a million spells, every wizard's going to be completely different. If you're unaware how diverse Pathfinder spells can get, consider clicking on this video where I go over 10 of my favorite spells in the entire system. It's insane. Like I'm not even being hyperbolic. There is a spell that turns you and your companions into a stampeding herd of mammoths to crush the enemy. You can cast this on NPCs. It's insane. Go watch that video if you haven't already. The Witch, very similar to the Wizard in that they just cast prepared spells, however similar to the Sorcerer based on the Witch's patron, you cast from different spell lists. While wizards are always arcane, witches can be anything. Primal, you can be a divine witch, you can be an occult witch, and their entire gimmick is built around their familiar. Their familiar is effectively a direct connection to their patron, to the point where the familiar, whenever the witch casts specific abilities, like their hexes, the familiar will actually give off auras and special abilities, possibly inflicting conditions or preventing certain conditions from being removed to enemies. So the witch gets this really cool dynamic of casting spells, sustaining weak little effects, while their familiar moves around the battlefield and makes those effects more potent on the enemies. Witches are really cool, especially in the remaster. They got a lot more identity compared to the wizard, and I think they're fantastic. If you want to play something like a wizard, but you want a cat, and the cat can do stuff, play a witch. The Maggus. Let's go gambling! I'm not kidding. The Maggus is the most risk versus reward class in the entirety of Pathfinder 2e, even more than the Gunslinger. And this is because of the Maggus's Spell Strike ability. The Maggus, it's a spellcaster, but they're also a martial. They have full proficiency with martial weapons. You can have a greatsword and be casting spells, specifically spell striking, which is where you cast a spell into your weapon and attack with it. If you're high enough level where you can cast Disintegrate, you can load Disintegrate into your greatsword and swing on the enemy. And if you hit with your greatsword, that counts as hitting with Disintegrate, dealing both damage in one move. But that also means if you miss with your greatsword, you also miss with Disintegrate. And not only that, but you can't just spell strike again. Not only does it cost 2 actions to do, it also costs an action to recharge your spell strike, which means spell strike is effectively 3 actions. The third one can just be paid at a later time. It's badass. They have the potential to hit the single highest number abilities and attacks in the entire game, but when you miss, holy are you falling behind effectively an entire round of combat. But don't let that deter you. Magi are really, really cool. You can do it with cantrips as much as you like. Just the big thing to be aware of, and this is where Maggus does feel the worst in my opinion, they only get 4 spell slots maximum. I believe 6 per day if you take a specific feat. They are what's known as a bounded spellcaster. There's only a few of these in the entire system, and they can only cast spells in their 2 highest ranks. So if you are character level 5, you can cast 2 third rank and 2 second rank spells per day. You can no longer cast first rank spells. You can take a first rank spell and upcast it in one of those slots, but you can't use any first rank slots anymore. So not only are you high risk, high reward, but when you miss, you also have just missed 25% of your slots. Really high benefits if you can land, or gods forbid, critically hit a spell strike. But boy, when you miss, it's gonna hurt. You have to be ready for that. And if you're okay with that risk for the reward, highly recommend a Maggus. Psychics are really weird. They're actually a cantrip-focused caster. They still have full ranked spell slots they can cast from the occult spell list, but their entire subclass is based around not only making cantrips more powerful, but also giving them alternate abilities. Each subclass gets, I believe, 2 cantrips, which become amped cantrips. You can spend a focus point to upgrade these. And even if you don't spend the focus point, they're better than if any other caster would use those cantrips. It's really, really cool. They'll increase the damage die of something, or they'll increase the range, or they'll do something else. And then if you amp it with a focus spell, it gets even better. I believe that there's a subclass of Psychic that can cast the message cantrip from a super high range, even through walls, if it becomes amped. It's a really cool character design, and overall, it's just a really cool representation of psychic abilities that don't go into the realm of game-breaking psionics of systems in the past. It's actually really refreshing, and I recommend giving the Psychic a read even if you don't plan to play it. It's in the Dark Archive, which in my opinion is one of the best books Pathfinder has ever gotten in its lifespan. The Psychic is a super cool class that I highly recommend you check out, just from a game design perspective. Taking the weakest form of spells and making them almost on par with spell slots is so flipping cool. I didn't mean to swear there. I'll dub over it. Flipping They'll never know. The Animist, another class that I haven't read because it's from the same book as the Exemplar. But I do have one in my campaign, and they're really cool so far. They are also a divine caster. However, they cast utilizing the spirits of the dead. Each day, you channel a primary spirit and a secondary spirit. Both spirits add different spells to your available spells to cast that day. However, your primary apparition gives you special benefits and abilities, as well as unique focus spells you can cast. I wish I could tell you more, but that's about it. If you want to play a spellcaster who derives their benefits from the actual spirits of the dead that you are housing within your body and utilizing to create magical effects, play an Animist. I'll make a guide someday. Probably. Maybe. I promise nothing. The Oracle. Oh god, people get mad at me when I make fun of the Oracle. I'm not going to make fun of the Oracle because it's a cool class, especially flavor-wise. The Oracle is awesome. This is another divine caster. However, they draw all of their power from a massive curse built and placed on and within them because they searched too deep into something that a mortal should not be looking into, whether that be flames or battle or bones. You did so much research and fascination, hyperfixation on this thing that the universe basically cursed you and said, hey, stop. And you said, I have ADHD, you can't stop my hyperfixation. So you get a lot of unique abilities, and these abilities are a little stronger than the abilities of an average spellcaster, but often not worth the detriment. You see, a lot of your abilities have the curse-bound trait, and when you use these abilities, your curse-bound condition increases, and your subclass, basically the curse you are afflicted with, has unique effects for each level of Cursebound, and they get worse the higher it gets. At low levels, it caps at Cursebound 2, then it gets to Cursebound 3, and eventually Cursebound 4, which becomes pretty devastating. But basically, what ends up happening is these cursed effects, especially early on, aren't that detrimental if you avoid what they penalize. You know, some of them might give you penalties to melee attack rolls, and you go, cool, I just won't be in melee. The problem is your curse-bound abilities are what you want to use. They're sort of what make you an oracle, but if you are already at your current maximum curse-bound, for example, at level 1, you cannot go past curse-bound 2, you cannot use any more curse-bound abilities. So you're very restricted to what you can do based on your current level of curse. I highly recommend checking it out yourself. This is one that's really hard to describe in a quick 2-minute explanation. It is one of the most complicated classes in the game. I've said that for years, and I will continue to say it even in the remaster. It's a lot more complicated than something like a Cleric for a Divine Caster. So if you just want a simple Divine Caster, maybe look at Cleric. But if you want something with a lot of potential story and plot tie-in, Oracle is fantastic for that. And the final magical class is the Summoner. This is a very interesting class. I typically would not recommend to new players, but I'll never say no if someone is willing to look into and understand their class. The reason the Summoner is so interesting and complicated is because you're playing as two characters, your Summoner and their Eidolon, and they don't get different turns in initiative. When you are in combat, the Summoner and the Eidolon share 3 actions. They technically get 4 actions per turn, but that's through the use of tandem actions, which are basically 2 actions for a single action split between them. You see what I'm getting at. The Summoner is really, really cool. There's a lot of different Eidolon options, from dragons to fae to beasts, and what I like about them is your Eidolon determines the type of spell you're casting. If it's a dragon, you cast arcane spells. If it's undead ghosts, you cast occult spells. If it's a demon, you cast divine spells. It's awesome. Another thing to keep in mind, though, summoners do share hit points with their Eidolons, and most Eidolons want to be in melee. So even if your caster is on the back line, if your dragon is up there getting stabbed in the heart, you are taking that heart stabbing damage. So it can be a lot for a new player to keep track of, but I've been playing alongside a summoner for the last 2.5 years in my Kingmaker campaign, and it's been a blast, not only from a combat perspective, but also the roleplay of having this almost extra-dimensional creature directly tied to a party member. It's really fun to be walking around with a large-sized dragon just traipsing along beside the party. Makes it really easy to intimidate people. Something to keep in mind is summoners are also bounded casters just like the Maggus, meaning 4 spell slots per day or 6 maximum if you take a specific feat, so you will often be using cantrips on your summoner while making melee attacks with your Eidolon. But that is a cool feature of the class, is they sort of get to experience both martial combat and spellcasting without having to sacrifice or use multiple different ability scores. It's nice. It's cool. I do recommend I recommend every class. I'm not going to keep saying, I recommend this class. But yeah, if you don't find that too overwhelming and you love the idea of having a companion alongside you that can talk and interact and engage and exist in the world, love the Summoner. Okay, and these last 6 classes I have lovingly referred to as the monkeys. Not the band or the animal, but like skill monkeys, because they do things really, really well. Or if they don't do a lot of different cool things really well, they bend the rules of the system. I also just wanted a third word that ends in M: martial, magic, and monkey. Let's start off with the actual skill monkey, the rogue. The rogue is very familiar to what you've seen in a lot of different RPG systems. They are the sneaky ones. They get sneak attack. They can do a lot of cool roguey things, but in Pathfinder 2e, the big calling card of the rogue is the sheer amount of skill proficiencies they start with. Most classes get a number of skills equal to like maybe 2 to 4 plus your intelligence modifier, and then you'll get like 2 or 3 other skill proficiencies from other parts of your character, like your background. So most characters might start with like 7 or 8 skill proficiencies based on their intelligence. Rogue's base class gets 7 skill proficiencies plus intelligence plus an extra skill from their subclass. And there's an intelligence-based subclass. In fact, that's another really cool thing about rogues. Every other class in the game tends to have like 1 or 2 key ability scores they can choose from. You know, fighters and rangers are strength or dexterity. Wizards are intelligence. Sorcerers are charisma. Rogues are strength, dexterity, intelligence, or charisma. Any of those 4 based on your subclass. You can be a ruffian rogue, which is a strength-based rogue, which is so cool. They can sneak attack with like a spear, which is sick. You can be a classic thief, who is the only class in the game who can add their dexterity score to damage instead of their strength. That is actually something that has very mixed feelings about the game. Nobody can add dex to damage except the thief rogue, and I'm okay with that because that makes the thief rogue feel a lot more special. You can also play the mastermind, which is intelligence based, or you can play an eldritch trickster, which uses whatever spellcasting modifier is of any other spellcasting class you choose to steal from. If I were to compare it to like the 5e arcane trickster, where you get like arcane spells specifically, the eldritch trickster, you literally take what's called an archetype of any other spellcaster in the game. You could be a Maggus eldritch trickster. Even beyond that, you could be a druid eldritch trickster, a rogue with a little bit of natural magic weaved in that you can sneak attack with. I just love how weird the rogue is in Pathfinder 2e, and their feats complement this so well. They have a wide variety of feats, some leaning more into skill usage, some leaning more into direct damage, some being subclass specific to expand upon the concept of the chosen subclass. It's crazy. Rogues are one of my favorite classes in Pathfinder 2e, and it is easily my favorite presentation of the rogue in the entirety of any TTRPG system I've ever played. Also, I'm going to say this just because I don't want to make a big deal of it, but Jacob keeps hitting it, so I'm going to hit it. Getting someone off guard so you can sneak attack is so easy. Just flank, or feint, or hide, or create a diversion. There's so many options, Jacob. I love you. I'm not making fun of you, but please. It's so easy. I love you. The Swashbuckler. This is sort of if the fighter and the rogue had a baby in a really cool way, with an emphasis on just being a badass. And I'm not even kidding. The Swashbuckler is built around their panache mechanic. This is where, whenever you tumble through an enemy space or perform a specific skill action based on your chosen subclass, you gain panache. Not only does panache increase your movement speed, but it also lets you deal bonus damage with all of your attacks as long as you have it. So you do something cool at the start of combat to impress everybody and stroke your own ego, and now you're doing bonus damage with all of your attacks. Or you can choose to spend that panache on a finisher. All Swashbucklers start with a confident finisher, which still deals damage even if it misses, which is great in certain circumstances. But there are also tons of feats to give you new finishers, new ways to use your panache, new ways to gain panache. There's so many cool ways to play a Swashbuckler. If you want to play somebody who is just this over-the-top, braggart, whatever, just super cool and full of themselves in combat, play a Swashbuckler, because there's even rule of cool built into the class, where if you do something in combat that you get your GM to agree is badass enough, you gain panache. Even if it's not your subclass option, even if it's not tumbling through. If you decide to leap and roll athletics to jump a 10-foot gap to land on the other side, and your GM says that was unnecessary and cool, you get panache. It is such an awesome part of the class, and I love it. The Investigator, the closest class to a rogue while still keeping its own class identity. Very similar to the rogue, it does have a pseudo sneak attack known as Strategic Strike, but what I love about the Investigator is that they are an intelligence-based martial class. They can use their intelligence to attack an opponent, but only if they devise a strategy first. You are playing Sherlock Holmes in combat. What you can do is roll a d20, you spend an action for this, you roll a d20 on a target, and you get to see what that d20 would be. If it's like a 16, you can use your next action to say, okay, I attack them with a 16. Also, I get to add my intelligence modifier instead of strength, and you attack them and deal your bonus strategic strike damage. But what's nice is if you roll like a 2, you can go, I don't want that one. And you can just attack somebody else. You only get the intelligence bonus if you attack the original target, but they literally get to see their attack roll before they attack. And if you use the class correctly, that becomes a free action. It's such a cool way to play a character who is constantly analyzing the battlefield and making optimal decisions that you yourself don't need to be a battle master to make. Just by getting to roll your dice ahead of time and decide if that attack is going to work or not, you get control. You get that like time stop moment of analyzing everything around you, and I think that's so damn cool. The Inventor is one of the less sung classes of Pathfinder, and I could have put this into a martial class because it is technically just a martial combatant with some subclass specialties, but I wanted to put it into monkeys because it breaks the rules of the system. Inventors get 3 different subclass choices: Armor Inventor, Weapon Inventor, or Construct Inventor. Construct Inventor is pretty similar to something like a Ranger or a Druid's Animal Companion, except obviously it's a robot, and you can customize it with a lot of different ways. That's the cool thing about the Inventor. No matter which subclass you pick, you get to augment your own creation, making it yours. Like if you choose Weapon Inventor, you get to augment that weapon with 1 or 2 of a bunch of different options, and as you level up, you get more options and stronger options to change your weapon. You can literally have a short sword that when you attack with it, it has reach because it has a spring-loaded button that you stab and it extends forward on a spring, hits the opponent, and comes back into its shaft. The Inventor also has a lot of things I'm not a big fan of, but a lot of the issues come at the end of the game. For example, their level 19 class feature just lets you switch subclasses during your daily preparation, which is so unfun. But everything else around it, their feats, they've got a lot of cool usage of the gadget consumable item that I need to make a video on because nobody knows what gadgets are in Pathfinder 2e. They're actually kind of cool. I'll talk about them soon. Stick around. But yeah, the Inventor literally gets to take weapons or armor or a companion and break the rules, add mechanics onto them, make them immune to other mechanics that they would normally not be immune to. It's really cool. If you like a character that can sort of warp the game in their own little way, Inventor's a really fun way to do it. Break the rules, make your own rules, and it's just cool to have like, this is my weapon. It's not just a +1 longsword. This is my stabby poker 9000. Also, it can explode. The Kineticist is probably the single most complex class on the surface and one of the easiest classes to play in practice. The Kineticist picks one of, I believe, 6 or 7 different elements. However, you can also be a dual gate. Basically, it's Avatar. Do you want to be an airbender? Do you want to control fire and water, or metal, or wood, or earth? It's so cool. They're sort of a spellcaster that doesn't use spell slots. Rather, they use impulses as long as they are channeling their elements. They have weaker impulses, which are sort of on par with something like a cantrip, which you can just use every single turn. Very much their main attack, their elemental blast, very much deals cantrip level damage. It's cool, and it even gets benefits and changes based on if you use 1 or 2 actions, or if it's ranged or in melee. But my personal favorite part of Kineticist is their overflow abilities. These are sort of abilities on par with something that would cost like a spell slot from a full caster. However, when you cast them, you stop channeling your element. You overflow your element out of your body, getting this huge effect, so it's just like a mini earthquake as an earth kineticist. And then, not only do you have to spend all the actions on that, but if you want to use any more impulses, you have to re-channel on your next turn. It's a really cool balancing act of, okay, do I do a weak ability that I can keep doing over and over again, or do I overflow knowing it'll cost me an action tax later? It's awesome. I love Kineticist. It's a lot of research based on what you want to do because they have so many feats, but most feats are confined to a specific element. So if you just want to be a wood Kineticist, you only have to concern yourself with the wood feats. And finally, one of my favorite classes, yet still a class I have never had the joy of running or playing with, the Alchemist. It's exactly what it says on the tin. You're an alchemist. Every day you are making alchemical items that last throughout the day and disappear the next morning as they go inert, but you can make new ones every day, and you can use quick alchemy to create short-lasting ones like little bombs or healing potions that you need in that moment. The quick alchemy, I think, is where the alchemist shines. Not only do you have everything you prepared that day during daily preparations for free, by the way, but with quick alchemy, you can create any item. However, it wears off. It goes inert after 6 seconds. So your friend needs health right now. Well, you quick alchemy up a healing potion, an elixir of life. It's different. And you just dump that down their throat. Boom. You've effectively been a healer. Oh, something's getting away? Well, you can quick alchemy up an alchemist fire and chuck it at that guy to kill him in Minecraft. The Alchemist is the ultimate jack of all trades when it comes to what you need. As long as it is in their formula book, they can quick alchemy it up and use it that turn, or even better, because it doesn't go away until your next turn, you can hold it out to somebody, they can take it, and they can use it if you didn't have enough actions or whatever. The Alchemist is very complicated. You have to read, well, you don't have to, but it is encouraged to research up a bunch of different alchemical items. Just as there's a ton of different spells in the game, there are so many alchemical items, some that do damage, some that heal, some that inflict conditions, there's poisons, there's so much. And if you want to learn more about them, I actually have a ranking video where I ranked every single alchemical item from one of the books in Pathfinder 2e. You can click that right here if you want to go check it out. I'm gonna go drink some water because I just talked for 55 minutes straight and my phone is about to run out of battery.